Hey guys, welcome back to another impressions video, different background as you can see, and tonight I'm gonna talk about the latest game I beat, which is none other than Batman Arkham Origins Blackgate for the PlayStation Vita. This game was also available at release for the Nintendo 3DS, and it saw the release of a deluxe edition not too long ago, available for the PlayStation 3, the 360, and the Wii U, I believe. So if you're looking into playing this game right off the bat, I'm just gonna recommend you guys playing the deluxe edition because it fixes some of the issues that are present in the handheld versions of the game. The drawback is that it's available only digitally for the deluxe edition. So if you guys are into collecting, physical games or physical releases, the handheld versions is the only way to go in this regard. But nevertheless, it's an enjoyable game, but obviously it pales when in comparison to the proper Arkham games available on the consoles, and I'll develop into why. This game was developed at Armature Studios, which is again, it's not Rocksteady, the proper development studio that takes care of the Arkham games for the consoles, for the most part anyways. The premise is a little bit different. Story-wise, I'm not going to spoil anything like I usually do, but the short synopsis of the game is that it takes 3 months after the events of Arkham Origins, and it basically takes place inside the Arkham Blackgate prison that was built during Batman Origins. And as you can probably imagine, some of the villains that were imprisoned in the Blackgate prison managed to escape, and it's up to Batman to capture all of them and lend a hand to a villain from the Batman series. That I'm not gonna spoil anything. You guys, if you guys are interested, you'll find the story. But it's always the same basically. In summary, it's Batman chasing the villains or the bad guys. Now, as far as the let's just jump right into let's talk about the graphics, I guess, a little bit. This game has actually pretty good graphics for being a handheld only game. I'm not really sure how the 3DS version pales in comparison, or it stacks up against the Vita version, but the Vita version has some pretty nice graphics for taking into account the limitations of the this game against the console versions, obviously. The game looks pretty good. It has the typical atmosphere and scenery of other Batman games, where it has a very dark look and art direction, so don't expect to see a lot of bright colors or anything like that in this game. But the game does look fairly good for being a handheld title on the PlayStation Vita. And let's just jump right into the gameplay, because that's where this game really differentiates from the console Arkham games. And essentially, I like the idea that the developers or the publisher had for this game. This is essentially a side-scrolling action-adventure game. I guess you can call it a Metroidvania game, because there's a lot of backtracking, there's a lot of exploration once you get some of the upgrades and things like that. So Metroidvania is a perfect way to describe this game. Unfortunately, don't get too excited with that statement, because I know there's a lot of fans out there of the genre that like the Metroid games, the Castlevania games, and this is nowhere near the quality of those games. But it's definitely an okay game, above average. I had a pretty good time, and the reason why it fails to meet that standard of quality of other Metroidvania type of games is the game gets a little bit repetitive. There's a ton of backtracking that feels unnecessary. Essentially, sometimes most of the game, I would say 70 or 80% of the game revolves around you guiding Batman to an objective. Say you have to activate a switch to open a certain section of the prison. So when you get to activate that switch, you find out that in order to activate the switch, there's a key that a prison guard has it. So you have to go to a different section of the prison, backtrack a whole lot, and when you get finally to the prison guard that has the key, he tells you something else. You have to go and activate a generator that's on the outside of the building, and then you have to go back and activate the generator. But when you get to activate the generator, something else happens, and you keep like back, you kept getting away from your original objective, which is just to activate a switch. So you have to do all these prerequisites that they just keep adding on top of each other, and it gets really frustrating because you never feel like you're accomplishing progress in the game, because you're constantly being sent backwards, if you want to call it that. So a lot of sub-objectives within objectives that are just a little bit frustrating, and in my opinion they affect a little bit the exploration and the gameplay, because the prison, the design of the prison itself, it's okay, but it's not anything memorable. Like I mentioned before, the environments are very much alike in terms of the looks of the environment. Very dark, very industrial looking. Like it's a prison after all. And even though the prison does have different like sections, like industrial, there's the administration building and things like that, they try to add a little bit of diversity in terms of the different areas and the different names, but everything has like the same look, the same colors and the same tones. So it does get a little bit frustrating exploring the prison. Just like any other Metroidvania games, you get items that allow you to do different things. You get your hook shot that allows you to go up to higher places or to pull out grates and things like that. You get explosives that allow you to break into walls that are kind of weak. So throughout the game, you'll find yourself getting to places that you can progress farther, but you need certain items. So you have to keep a track, or either by memory or write down in a piece of paper how to solve or how to get back there later in the game. And it's kind of funny because the biggest negative thing about this game definitely is the map. And in a Metroidvania game, a map, in my opinion, it's very important to know how to read the map. And in this game, the map it just plain sucks. It basically has to do with the fact that the game is not fully a side-scrolling game. There are different planes, if you want to call it. Like you may see Batman on a 2D side-scrolling plane, but on the background you may see like something that you can grapple with your hookshot or whatever. And then as soon as you use your hookshot, you go back into that background and the camera turns around. So it's actually like a 3D environment that it forces you to play it on the side-scrolling plane. So sometimes you may be running and the camera angle will turn and your character will turn into a different corridor, for example. So it really is a 3D world, but stuck with a perspective of side-scrolling. And this generates a problem when it comes to portraying that into the map of the game, because the map is just basically a flat picture, flat rectangles and squares that have your little dot that represents your position in the map. So whenever you're moving in this 3D plane, even though it's a side-scrolling game, the map is 2D and it fails to represent. It's really hard to get an orientation going on, if you want to call it that. From what I've heard, that issue has been fixed in the deluxe version, because the map is like 3D. You can like rotate it. It has like basically an XYZ plane, so you can rotate and see, zoom in, zoom out, and rotate the map as you see fit. So you have an idea on where the hell you are in the actual room that you're trapped, for example. So in that regard, straight away I recommend the deluxe version, just to avoid the annoyance and the nuisance of using the map, which is again unfortunate, because this is a Metroidvania game and you're gonna be using the map a lot. So in that regard, that's a big negative in this game. Now, as far as the combat system, let's talk about the combat system, because in my opinion, the Arkham Batman games on the consoles have the best and the most addicting combat system out of any video game. And kudos to the developer. They were able to translate that combat system into the handheld version of the Vita. However, there are some negatives, and I'll explain why. If you guys are familiar with the combat system in the console versions, you know that you can pull combos, and you have different abilities that you can use, such as you can use your Batarang to stun enemies. You can use your cape if you push circle to stun enemies. You can, if you double tap your jump button, you can leap over enemies, and obviously if you push the triangle button, that's your counter. So whenever an enemy is about to hit you, there's this prompt on the screen, and if you push the counter button, Batman, counters the attack of the enemy. So it's a copy paste of the console combat system, and it's in that regard it translates very well in terms of all the moves. They're basically there and intact. So that's the good news for the veterans of the Batman series, if you want to call it. However, the negative is that the combat is extremely slow, for once, and for another point is that there's not a whole lot of enemies to fight throughout the game, as opposed to the console versions where there's always enemies and counters, and it's always fun to fight them and build up your combos and things like that. I can't help but to think that that was probably a hardware limitation on both for the 3DS and the Vita. So I'm not really sure if the deluxe edition has like more enemy encounters, but in my opinion, they were pretty scarce on the Vita version, and I'm assuming it is the same on the 3DS version. So it was very difficult to have fun and pull these crazy combos, and not to mention again the combat is really slow. Compared to the console versions, it feels like you're playing in slow-mo, and just connecting your combos is very sluggish, and sometimes it's so slow that the combos will just break for no apparent reason, or to the contrary, sometimes you'll be able to maintain your combo even though you were supposed to lose it, if that makes any sense. It's like a very glitchy and just not very well defined combat or combo system. Another negative thing about the combat system in this game versus the console versions is that even though you're able to build up combos, you don't get rewarded with experience points. So the light RPG elements that are present in the console versions completely disappear from this version. In the console versions, you build up experience. The better your combos, the more skills you use. You can navigate through unlock trees, and you can unlock new abilities for your combat and things like that. So this game doesn't have that, so it loses that those light RPG elements that were present in the console versions of the game. So again, the idea really good. They were able to translate the commands and the controls into the handheld version, and in my opinion that's very impressive. Unfortunately, the combat is very sluggish, and there's no experience points and things like that. So it's almost like a positive but also a negative thing when it comes to the combat system. Now, faithful to the console games, this also has the stealth portions of the game where you're able to sneak around enemies, and you're able to hide inside the grates on the floor and things like that. You're able to use your batarang or your hook shot to navigate on top of structures that are on top of the enemies. So there are a lot of stealth portions in the game that unfortunately they're not as fun as the console versions, obviously because you're forced to act in that 2D side-scrolling plane. So a lot of the times if you get spotted, it's not really fun. You can just beat the enemy down and call it a day basically. So the stealth sections are not obviously as fun as the console version of the game. So the game does suffer from that, and when you combine everything, the somewhat lackluster Metroidvania elements with the not so good combat system and with the not so good stealth portions of the game, you might be thinking this game is just not good at all. But again, I would say it's an above average game. If you enjoyed the Batman, the Arkham games on the consoles, I say definitely check this out, because now that the deluxe version is out digitally, I'm sure it's available for a reduced price, and I think it's worth a shot if you guys are into the Batman superhero comics or movies and things like that. There's a lot of content that I think fans of Batman will appreciate. There's a lot of somewhat animated, they're not really animated cutscenes, but they have this comic book look to them that, in my opinion, it looks very good. As far as the sound, it's impeccable. The voice acting is really great. The script is fantastic. The music, it goes on par with the other Batman games. So Sound wise, this game is pretty good, both using the soundtrack and the voice acting. It's really superb. So the presentation, it's there for fans of Batman, but unfortunately, again, this game pales very much so when compared to the console games, which are Origins, Arkham Asylum, and Arkham City. And of course, the new one coming out for the PS4 and Xbox One in June, I believe. So, Batman Arkham Origins Blackgate, a above average game. Again, be careful when if you want to try this game. Again, if you can get it for cheap, I say definitely try it. And see if you can enjoy it. It's a Metroidvania game that again, it's a little bit tedious when it comes to exploration and things like that, but the combat system is not as good, and the stealth portions are not as good, but I was able to find enjoyment to the point where I was able to beat the game, which, by the way, it took me around 8 to 9 hours. I was trying to be as thorough as I could with as far as collectibles. The game does have a lot of collectibles, if you want to call it that. You can upgrade, you can find new pieces of suit, and you can find armor upgrades and things like that help you in the combat. So a lot of collectibles in the game that I was not able to collect all of them, but a good portion of them. So yeah, it takes about, I would say, if you guys rush through the game, you can probably finish this in like 6 to 7 hours. But I was exploring a little bit, trying to get all the collectibles, as many as I could before I finished the game, and it ended up taking me 8 to 9 hours, I think. So Batman Arkham Origins Blackgate, a game with a lot of flaws, but worth checking out if you're curious to find out what the game is about, especially if you're a fan of the Arkham games on the consoles. So that's it for now. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video, and thank you for watching.